Well, New York Liberty fans, we know one team definitely going to the WNBA finals, and we hopefully will soon find out if the New York Liberty will join them. That's what we're talking about on this episode of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans brought to you by Black Rosie Media. Gotta get up, gotta get up, gotta get up. Hey, women's basketball fans, welcome to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans brought to you by Black Rosie Media and hosted by Erica L. Ayala. All right, everyone. Erica L. Ayala here, back with Misha Jones and Brian Florentin. Fam, all right. It's Las Vegas looking to run it back. Misha, we'll start with you since Brian and I were on the last two episodes, but let us know, do you think the New York Liberty can perhaps join Vegas in the final? Is it going to take more than Game 4? What are your thoughts?
So, yes, short answer, yes. I do think it will be Vegas and New York in the final. However, just like the last time I was on here, I am standing firm on my word. I think this series is going to 5. I think because obviously Connecticut not having Beck Allen in the last matchup was a huge blow to them. Found out today via Twitter, and I wish I could cite it. I should have looked it up before we came on here. But Steph White found out 10 minutes before the game that Beck Allen could not play. That, as a coach, is your worst nightmare, especially for somebody who, coming into that first game in New York, Beck Allen was the reason why Connecticut won that game, point blank, period. So I think having her back gives a big boost to Connecticut, has an impact on the game, and makes this series go 5.
All right, Brian, you heard what Misha had to say. Do you agree with them, or what you thinking?
I'm thinking, I feel like Sunday might be the season finale for Connecticut. Something that was interesting to me, and we had talked about it after the Game 2, in the Game 2 podcast, was that we thought that Dejanay Carrington was injured. That's why Steph White didn't play her. And in the pregame for Game 3, she was like, oh no, we just didn't think that she would. We just thought that the players we had on the court was a little bit better, which I found to be highly surprising considering how effective Carrington is and the size she gives Connecticut. So, and I feel like blow-ups happen, but it's never good to have a blow-up like that when the play that happens. So when stuff like that happens, it's one of those moments where you just got to try to wash it off as much as you can and not let that eat at you too much. So I wonder how Connecticut's going to bounce back, because they were deeply frustrated in that game in a way that I haven't seen the Sun team like throughout this entire run be frustrated with, like, the lack of success, what they thought were bad calls, missed bad layups, things like that. I hadn't seen that level of frustration from them. So I wonder, with their season on the line, how they're going to be able to bounce back against a New York team that's really locked in.
Yeah, so for those who maybe missed it, we're talking about there was a moment, I guess, as the first quarter was coming to a close, where Alyssa Thomas, AT, there was a whistle blown, and you see her barking. And at first, I thought she was barking at the referee, at the official over there, and then it just kept happening. The official had already stepped away, and I realized that's the Connecticut Sun bench. And there was also a video of Dejanay Carrington and what looked like was likely AT going back and forth. There were a few people on the bench, I think maybe trying to calm Dejanay down, but then it's ultimately DeWanna Bonner, not necessarily a neutral party, is separating the two. And, even on, I did a quick digital hit after this game, and I think it's obvious for people to want to lean into the storyline of the drama, and let's keep it real. That is drama. That's it, as Brian kind of alluded to, what definitely not only what you don't want to see, but what you don't necessarily expect for teams that are usually very locked in for the playoffs, but also tempers flare in the playoffs. And Alyssa Thomas has been down this road before, where a Connecticut team just doesn't get over the hump. And listen, if I were her, I'd be tired too, Misha. And these things happen in sports is kind of what people are saying. And I don't want to make this like a men's sports versus women's sports. Yes, these things do happen in sports, but I don't know that excuses that they shouldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Period. but you definitely don't want them happening in the postseason.
Yeah, definitely not ideal. Definitely not ideal. I am part of the faction, however, that you're like you said, AT plays with that kind of fire. She plays with that kind of emotion. And so as a person watching, I don't expect anything but that kind of flair from her. Dejanay, we haven't really seen it from her before. I haven't, at least. But as a hooper, when you're down in those trenches with your team, sometimes some things need to be said. You know what I mean? And I don't know what was said, and so you can't talk too much about it or speculate on it. But when it comes down to it, the season is on the line, and there have been 30, however many games they played to this point. You don't want to lose just because somebody's not giving their best effort. And in that last game between Connecticut and New York, it really did seem like Alyssa Thomas was on a plane that her team needed to rise to the occasion and didn't quite meet her there. Kind of like what we saw from, not to bring the Mystics into it, but kind of like what we saw from, the Mystics in that last game of the series with New York, right? Natasha Cloud putting up 33 points and putting it all on the line. And that's not to say Elena Delle Donne and Brittany Sykes and Ariel Atkins aren't tremendous basketball players, but some nights you just don't have it. And in some situations, it's not being brought out of you, either intrinsically or sometimes you need an extrinsic motivator. And, we'll see if they can clean it up, though. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think all of that makes a lot of sense, and so the situation will be on whether Connecticut is going to focus on, the right enemy, so to speak. Because listen, there are times where, if we keep it funky, like you'll absorb that because that's how someone is. They're always going to be. It was usually me on the team, so I could definitely relate to 18.
Give it a real.
Listen, and sometimes I could do that with people, and it was like squashed immediately as soon as the game is over. Other people. And I'm not judging it. I'm just saying it's definitely something that I had to learn as the AT, the engine usually. Sometimes you got to realize that that's something that you're going to have to deal with later. And that, listen, that person felt the way they felt. And that's real too. You might not agree. It might not have been your intent. But that's why we say intent, it can't supersede, again, the impact. So I think it's going to be curious. It really, though, goes to the leadership, I think, also of Stephanie White, because kind of as you were saying, if I'm the coach, I'm like, listen, some of that worked.
Because what happened, right? Because what happened?
They started getting their life together, and they won all 3 quarters except the first quarter. So you effed around early on, and you found out. You found out. Had to be your own team, because apparently the scoreline wasn't computing.
It wasn't going through. It wasn't getting in there. Yeah.
So anyway, what Stephanie White has to figure out is, does she want, and is it appropriate, and is it going to have more of an impact to have that barking come from AT, or does she need to bring the power back? And I think if we're being real, I don't think people would assume that the first scenario should or even could happen. But like, let's be real. Like, that happens in sports too. Sometimes that coach is going to be like,
my hands are tied. Real talk. And also considering that Connecticut has been in this position time and time and time and time again with AT and DeWanna Bonner specifically on this court, and Natisha Heideman as well, who, we can talk about her a little bit as well, but I'll ease up on her for the moment. When you have players who've been in this situation, who experienced that particular kind of disappointment after playing an entire season and working so hard, and again, AT playing the way she plays, to not have it pan out, you're not giving that up for nobody. And sometimes, Steph White just stepped in, won Coach of the Year, but sometimes you just got to let the ballers be ballers.
Yeah, sometimes you got to let them do that. And it is a fine balance, because we're not going to talk too much about the other series on this episode, but I would love to get y'all to weigh in. Brian, we'll start with you. I don't know if you got to watch the last seconds especially, but LT drew up something, and it was Arike that was barking at her, and it just seemed to me like everybody wasn't on the same page, and they messed up because they had her mic'd up, so you heard all of this. And then what did we see?
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, timeout. And then there was another huddle, players only. I don't know, man. To me, that was almost more egregious and maybe perhaps indicative of a larger problem than players going at it, is when the players are like all like, it just looks to me like they huddled up because they were like, okay, that was cute, but like, what we really gonna do?
Which happens often. I don't know if folks who've never been in that huddle understand that, but like, it happens more often than you might think. Some of the best players in the world, you could get something from your coach in the timeout, and then you go out there and look at each other. Like, again, not to bring the Mystics into it, but you already know what I was gonna say. At New York, on y'all home floor, last game of the season, the Mystics had a huddle. Eric Tebow, I'm sure, drew something specific up, and I think they stuck to the plan mostly. But between the poppy crops, they talked about it in the post game. I looked at her, and she looked at me, and we said, "Okay,
Yep.
what we doing?"
Yep, that's
So,
true.
sometimes it goes that way, but yeah, that was a rough shot to go for. About that last shot, so many. Yeah. I think I even tweeted it. They played 3.5 great quarters, 3.5 excellent quarters, and then they got tentative after that last timeout. The last timeout and the timeout before that, they came out tentative. They came out like they didn't want to shoot. They didn't want to attack the basket the way they had been. They were scared to take chances, and in that's what happens. You get all. I won't say the words that I usually say to folks who be in that situation, but sometimes you clam up. You clam up a little bit.
There you go. Yeah, what you tweeted was it's a difference to play to win as opposed to playing not to lose.
Playing not to lose. Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's real. That's real. Okay, so let's talking about playing to win versus playing not to lose. Maybe that also is what Brian was alluding to with some of the tempers. It wasn't a must win because obviously there was going to be a game 4 regardless. But who wants to go into game 4 down? Mm-hmm. Because then you have to win that game and then you have to win another one. Right. I mean, alternatively, you put the other team in the other position as well. But from a fatigue, you hear a lot that teams, and Connecticut talks about it, we had to put so much energy. You exert so much energy trying to come back when you put yourself in a hole that sometimes even as your game is improving, you run out of time.
Yeah, out of time, out of gas, all the above. Yeah,
exactly. So, so who do we think is going to really take the fuel that they got from game 3 and bring that into game 4? Fuel. What are we talking about? I think we pretty much covered it when it comes to Connecticut. But Brian, I think the fuel and what we heard even in the Washington series is that they can finish it with a win.
Yeah. Yep. Like for the Liberty, they are very much a team that is not trying to do extra work. So if there's a game 3, not us. Game 5, we don't want to do that. Let's knock this out right now. So I feel like for this group, they're very much we need to get this done right now. We don't want to keep this. We don't want to let the team hang around. We don't want to do any extra back and forth. We want to come back to New York and leave Connecticut in Connecticut. That way we get to rest up, move on to another big battle, another draining series. So we gotta wrap it up right now. And even afterwards, Breanna Stewart in the huddle, in the team huddle, she was like, we got one more to go. And I think just this team being really locked in and dialed in that regard. And I think with a championship opportunity so close, and for a franchise that hasn't been there since 2002, I think they're really going to be dialed in. And the level of focus and detail that we usually see from them, I think is going to show up in a big way.
And see, I agree with all of that. Have we seen that for the majority of the season with the New York Liberty? Absolutely. Arguably the last 2 times, and there were 2 pretty big times that the Liberty didn't do that, was the aforementioned overtime game against, not to make it about the Mystics.
But we always gonna make it about the Mystics.
We always gonna make it. We might as well just co-brand the podcast at this point, because we always talk about the Washington Mystics. The Amtrak series is alive and well in our hearts.
But
that overtime game, what was on the line for the New York Liberty? It was a long shot, but they could have put themselves in a better position for first place. In theory, that was still on the line, but also not losing the last game of the season. And then we saw it, tough series against Washington, Brian, and they didn't really show up in game one. Putting Beck Allen's performance aside, that was what Sandy Brondello called the worst game of the season.
Yeah, I think definitely there are some moments where they take their foot off the gas and it's like, usually don't do that. What happened here? And I think every so often this team needs like a sort of kick in the butt to be like, okay, we need to be like fully serious and fully locked in. And I think game one was that for them, because even as they fell down behind by 12 in game two, you started seeing them figuring things out. You saw them really start to, I guess solve it might be a bit strong, but really start to impact the Sun on the other side of the ball with the zone and really making things difficult for them and clogging them up and exposing a weakness Connecticut has with the lack of shooting. So I think that the group is really starting to sort of like piece it together in the right way. And something from game three that went against the grain compared to them in the regular season was them letting up big leads. Like we've seen them blow 19-point leads, 18-point leads, 20-point leads. Connecticut went on those big runs, but the Liberty were able to steady themselves every single time. Even in the fourth, when I think Connecticut got it back down to like 10. New York just shot right back to get it back up to 17 and essentially end the game right there. They even, it even got to a point where AT got a few minutes to sit down because the game was completely out of reach, and she never sits. So just forcing AT and Bonner to the bench in that way, because Stephanie White had to almost wave the white flag on the night, I think is a really big sign for this group that, hey, we can, if we'll take those body blows, but we won't get knocked down, and then we can use that to really wear out the opponent, get them frustrated, tire them out, and then when it's over, they're out of time, they're out of gas, they're out of energy, and we're still going.
Yeah, I mean, I again, that's just the urgency that the New York Liberty, it's like self-imposed. It's not within the parameters of the series, but they're putting that on themselves, get it done, smarter, not harder. But again, the other motivator is back against the wall, Misha. And, this is a Connecticut team that in a different way, they'll take punches too. Their punches usually come by surprise because they've been so consistent. And so it feels like it hurts more, but effectively we're saying the inverse, right? Where the New York Liberty had to have those growing pains early. And then build the consistency. The consistency is there. And so every time there's a little bit of a chink in the chain, it almost feels animated when it's the Connecticut Sun. And as you mentioned, this is another time. Is this going to be another season where another great regular season run is overshadowed by the agony of the postseason for the Sun?
Yeah, for folks who've been following the Sun team, folks who are fans of the Connecticut Sun, you hope not for their sake, because both of you have been to Mohegan Sun and having been in that arena and seeing how Uncasville, you know what I mean? Being out there in Uncasville is not easy to get to. You've heard a lot of people talk about that, but the fans there have been around that team and rallying around that team for some years now, and it's felt like they deserve a championship, but it's about timing. So many things have to come together for a team to be successful. And this season for Connecticut, to me, during the regular season, and of course I watched the games, but it seemed like it was kind of a given, you know what I mean? That they would end up in the playoffs because of that consistency for a while there, because you knew what you were going to expect, because you knew Alyssa Thomas was going to play with that will to win. DeWanna Bonner was going to be DB. She's going to be the legend that she is. But now that we're in the playoffs and the team is a little bit different than it was last season, like it's a matter of, is anybody going to step up and help AT? Is AT going to be on? And is DeWanna Bonner going to get going early the way she needs to? I think Carolyn Peck talks about it at least every WNBA countdown before the Connecticut Sun play. DB needs to get going early or it doesn't look good. But yeah, it's just like you said, they're consistent, but can they go above and beyond when they need to? Can they match Liberty's pace? Can they control the pace? So many different variables have to come together for the Sun to get this win.
I love also that you differentiated between matching and controlling the pace, because I think Connecticut, they definitely matched the pace, but they were not in control of it, which meant, and we talked, Brian, I think you briefly mentioned the zone, right? And it's something that on the podcast, the three of us have talked about just generally speaking, but thinking of how to scheme against New York Liberty teams, but it's similarly to, again, not to make it all about Washington, but we've had those conversations with when it comes to Washington, Vegas, Dallas, just because there's so much that all of those teams can do, and it starts with having access to the paint.
Yep.
And so a zone, generally speaking, again, use a soccer reference, you full on Sweden park the bus,
Yeah.
and hope for the best. No, but I think it's going to be heartbreaking for either team, and so much of the narrative is what we think is going to be the next matchup. We all talked about at the top of the show, but this is going to be an underappreciated, I think, semifinals matchup. And so too, if we're being honest, even though it was a sweep for Vegas, Dallas, and Brian and I talked about it, Misha, on the last episode. I said, just circle this. The Liberty won against Connecticut 82 points. The Dallas Wings lost to Vegas 82 points.
Yep.
The fact that in one series we're having a team with so much offense can tap out at 82, and a team that's clawing against another top scoring team also had 82. I mean, Dallas could cause some fits. They just ran out of, as we said, runway. They didn't have enough poise. But again, I just want to talk about that. We gotta have a show. We gotta have a podcast, because that is like fascinating to me. I keep trying to not go there, but also go there. All right, let's get into our predictions. You know how we do. We like to we can make straight line predictions, but I think it's also more fun to say that this has to happen for these teams to win. And Brian, I mean, we were pretty spot on with what we said about, game 3. So I'll start with you. Is there anything that you want to change? I mean, we talked about rebounding. We talked about, Jonquel Jones. I mentioned Courtney Vandersloot, who we didn't even get to early on. She had some offensive power. I think she maybe ran out of some gas. She had some pretty heavy minutes. But we'll start with your prediction for the Connecticut Sun. The Connecticut Sun need to do what in order to game 4?
I'd say that the Connecticut Sun need at least 18 points out of Tip Hayes. Tip has really been the third best player for the Sun this series. Beck Allen missing game 3 accepted. So I think they're going to need Hayes to really get downhill, really be able to hit those open 3-pointers that the Sun do get when they make passes against the Liberty zone. And they're going to need her to play. I think similar to ATM Bonner playing 40, I think that they're going to need Hayes for all 40, especially if Beck Allen is out. They're going to need that offensive punch. And the Suns point guards of Heideman and Harris haven't had the most success in the past 2 games. So it's going to be heavy on Tip Hayes to really be that offensive spark to really get this game to a really close position late.
Okay. Yeah. Because she went off again in game 2. And yeah, thinking about minutes for Connecticut, that's interesting. So Misha, what about you? Let's start with Connecticut. Same question. They'll win.
For Connecticut, I love the Tip Hayes point. I think you got to get at least 15 from her, or you got to get at least 15. And this is going to surprise y'all, from Natisha Heideman. You've got to get more from Natisha Heideman. You have to. And I alluded to it earlier that we might take a little time and go in on her a little bit. But she was dealing with that weird illness right before the first game between these 2 teams. You wonder if that's still kind of bothering her a little bit, but I think she has to produce. If not her, Ty Harris has to make at least 4 3-pointers, make New York think twice about that zone, and make Connecticut feel like they've solved it a little bit more, because I think even in situations where Alyssa Thomas gets the ball in the paint against that zone and they kind of collapse, like you said, park the bus and hope for the best. There were times even in game 2 where Alyssa Thomas catches it there 0-0 is diving to the basket. It's an easy bounce pass. Like, she can make things happen from there. But if the rest of the team is not still moving, is not still being a threat, is not still looking for the ball, then we have issues. And Ty Harris, to me, is going to be a key, because in that zone, you need a zone buster. So if Ty Harris doesn't make at least 4 threes, or if they don't get at least 15 points from Natisha Heideman or Tip Hayes, I think Connecticut loses.
All right. So, yeah, I'm looking at these numbers here. So Ty Harris, almost 29 minutes, was 4 for 12 overall, and then 2 of 6, it looks like, from 3. Yep. And to your point, Heideman, 5 points. And Tip Hayes had 16. So almost.
Yeah, but you need at least 30 total from the both of them. That's not enough.
Okay. Not enough. Yeah, but they didn't. I mean, they just got over 20. So, yeah, that's going to be interesting. Okay, let's switch it up. Misha, we'll start with you. New York Liberty will win the game and the series if.
So this one, I don't have a stat for this. I think the Liberty win this game if they just play Liberty basketball. And that sounds so simple. That sounds so easy. But frankly, we've seen the team that has mental lapses. And we've also seen the team where Benijah Laney's hitting threes when you're already up 8 with 3 minutes to go and skipping back and laughing and smirk. You know what I mean? Like, that's the team that we got to see. Everybody's got to be firing on all cylinders. Everybody's got to come to play. Because this team is so versatile, it's harder for me to kind of say, okay, this person needs to do this specific thing. That person needs to do this. Everybody just needs to show up and be prepared to do whatever the team needs to do to win this game. And it has to be smooth. They got to be rhythmic on offense, and just feel like the Liberty team that we saw for the majority of game 2. So, yeah.
Okay. Brian, your turn. New York Liberty, what do they have to do to get the win?
I think the first thing is that winning the glass again. When there were so many highlight plays in particular, there's one that really stands out in my mind. I think it was Ionescu had missed the 3, and then JJ raced from the other corner, skied in, snatched the board, and then had that put back. I was like, okay, this is a JJ game. And she did it like at least 3 times that game. I was like, good God, JJ is dialed in. And with her flying all over the court and being able to be such a presence on the interior, I think if the Liberty win the rebounding battle, it helps them get out on the run. It helps them get those easy transition baskets, gets those back-breaking Ionescu threes that she loves to hit. If JJ and the Liberty are able to control the glass, make sure that the Sun, when they do get in the paint, that they're meeting like a wall at the basket. If they're able to do that, I think they win.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I like what you said. And the numbers in the last game were closer than you might think in some of these areas. But the number that was absolutely not close at all was fast break points. And that goes to what we were talking about earlier, not only being able to keep up, but controlling. Connecticut had no control of this game. Biggest lead for the New York Liberty, 22. Connecticut Sun never got back into it. But I like what you're talking about. And I also think that I like, Misha, what you said about the Liberty just playing Liberty basketball, because that's really it. And that was so uncharacteristic in game 1. And it really bit them in game 2. I think they kind of survived not being in their best form. So for me, in addition to what y'all are saying, and I said it with Brian on our last episode, so I'll say it now that Misha has joined us, but I really think Courtney Vandersloot, I think I even said it when we did that one when I was recording in Brooklyn. Like, Courtney
before we even started this series, yeah.
Courtney Vandersloot needs to continue the uptick that we saw from her offensively. It looked like to me that she maybe ran out of some gas. She was in for 33 minutes, 17 seconds, 12 points. I liked what we were seeing from her early. I think she got a little bit fatigued, and that the fatigue showed up on the offensive side, more so on the defensive side, which I respect and appreciate. But I think she got a little fatigued there. But what did we see from Sab? 16 points, 10 from JJ with 12 rebounds, 25 from Stewie, 11 rebounds.
The whole starting 5 in double digits.
Yeah, Benijah Laney, 20 points, the difference maker could potentially be Courtney Vandersloot. And then my other point, which I loved, that Maureen Johannes got more minutes, but for the New York Liberty to win, they need to see more from Vandersloot and from Maureen Johannes. She put in 16 minutes. She had one of her signature 3-pointers, but it wasn't enough.
Right.
I don't think she got enough touches where she could really find her way into the offense. But I like what Sandy Brondello is doing. Brian and I talked about this on the last episode, because you have to get the bench involved. Yeah. She definitely was able to do that, Brian, in this last match.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Ionescu took like a little bump on her hip, but she says she's fine. So even with her being less than 100% at the moment, just having Johannes in the game, just keeping things steady. She also got a really good block, which surprised me.
Yes.
And I think I think we always forget that she has really long arms for a guard, and it's like, oh wow, Maureen has long arms. She's able to play the passing lanes. So I think for Johannes, if she's able to just be herself and continue to sort of keep the ball humming, make sure that if like just not forcing the action when she is trying to make things happen on offense, just keep the offense going. And then when she does get those open threes, shoot them with confidence. I think just having that goes a long way. And what Sandy's been doing is either pairing her with Ionescu or Vandersloot as the lead ball handler, so she can play off the ball, keep the movement going that way. If she's able to keep at that, I think she'd be able to make those positive contributions and help give the Liberty the advantage in the backcourt.
Yeah, I think that I'm still in the boat where I think the New York Liberty are going to take the series, and I think they're going to close it out on Sunday for a lot of, Brian, what you were talking about. But if they don't, and if Misha gets 5 games.
I just want to see more basketball. That's all I'm trying to see. I just want to see more basketball.
You're going to need Maureen Johannes, because at this point, these teams are – it's not they're evenly matched in that each has like a superpower, and it just happens to be like fire and ice, right? Mm-hmm. Team. So you then need an X factor. X factor for me, for the Liberty, has to be Maureen and Courtney Vandersloot. For Connecticut, we've kind of already said it and we've already seen it. I love Beck Allen having her revenge game. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what it is, the Tums, Pepto, whatever. I don't know what the vibe is, sis. I just hope it's good healing vibes that you get, because as someone who's always been a fan of her game and her journey, I would love to see her really have an opportunity to go off again. And then I like that Natisha Heideman. So I'm just curious to what you really want to say here, because I think that a lot of what you said is true. And Natisha Heideman is not one of the players like an AT that's been there the longest, even Bree Jones, but she's been there long enough. Mm-hmm. And she has a skill set that would benefit the Connecticut Sun. And, I think also the Connecticut Sun sees her as a guard that has to compete with these franchise building pieces like a Courtney Vandersloot. Eventually that means she's going to have to fit that mold for Connecticut. She hasn't really had to do that yet, but I think it's kind of time.
Yeah. She was definitely going to be my X factor for Connecticut, because I talked about Ty Harris being a zone buster. Obviously, Beck Allen is one too. But when Natisha Heideman is hitting, she's also a zone buster. When she's aggressive, we talk about Connecticut needing to control pace. Yes, they need to control pace, but they also are kind of in a race for points when the defense isn't there with New York, and they need to be able to put the ball in the basket at a high clip. And I think when Natisha Heideman is aggressive and she's putting the ball in the hole, and you have DB being aggressive, and you have Alyssa Thomas finding everybody, that makes them very difficult to stop. They start to look kind of like a clone of the New York Liberty in the fact that, you see AT getting into seams and finding kickouts and finding cutters. But when it's not like that, and you'll notice most of the time when it's not like that, it's because Natisha Heideman, if she's in the game, she's not really giving too much on the offensive end of the ball. Now on the defensive end, she, for the most part, does her job, as does most of Connecticut. But she's got to be my X factor for them. And then for New York, it's JJ. It's going to be JJ for me who's the X factor. A lot of folks are going to be like, how can she be an X factor? She's started to be more consistent. She's found her role within this New York Liberty team. But let's not forget, we know what it looks like when she doesn't do JJ things. You know what I mean? And I think when she doesn't, it's more of a detriment to their ability to be successful. We have seen her, and I want to give her props. I want to say congratulations to her for being in the GW Hall of Fame. DMV stand up, DC stand up. But when she's JJ, I don't think I think it's hard to stop her. I don't know if anybody on Connecticut matches that. So she's my X factor for the Liberty.
I see what you did there, because I was like, as you were like, I know there's gonna be some people. I was like, yes, I am those people. Like, it is me. I was like, what you mean she the X factor? I mean, I know you've been on the podcast before. What you mean?
Yeah, and that's not to say she's not a. I think a lot of people, when they hear X Factor, they automatically think it has to be a role player. And I think in some situations that's true, but people take these folks' skill sets for granted. Like, it's not there every night. We saw it with Breanna Stewart as well. Sometimes she don't have it on the offensive end, and that can be an X factor as to whether or not they win or lose a game. So that's it. That's all. No disrespect to JJ. We love you.
No, but I understand where you're coming from now, because I usually think about what the X factor adds as opposed to the X factor scenario can have the inverse impact, right? Yeah. So if they're not giving, they're not giving rebounds. If JJ's not giving rebounds,
it's not giving. It's not giving. If it's not giving, then it's not giving.
If it's not giving, it's not giving. I understand now, and I think that's a good pick, because we've talked about this on the show. The New York Liberty, what was a key to them finding consistency was JJ consistently getting double doubles. JJ at minimum being double-digit rebounds. And there was a stretch of time where the Liberty were undefeated, and it correlated with those numbers for Jonquel Jones. So I understand where you're coming from, and I freaking love that. And it also tees me up, and I know this is Gotta Get Up as a podcast for New York Liberty fans, but the other series was fascinating to me, including that Becky Hammond, a former member of the New York Liberty franchise, and in the Ring of Honor, there you go, there's a connection. She was asked what needs to be done, or something to the effect of when A'ja Wilson isn't playing well. And Becky Hammond had to remind people that A'ja Wilson may not have scored at the clip that we're used to, but that is far from the same as saying she had a bad game.
Very far, yeah.
And this is what people don't understand. And that's why I like the X Factor pick for Breanna Stewart, because Brian, you and I broke this down once before. And Sandy Brondello, even in her post-game comments, mentioned the games against Chicago, where they had a lead and, that thing went bye. And then to get a win against Chicago the next time at home, what had to happen, because Stewie was not shooting well, but she instructed every single person on that team, to the point where there was a time where Sabrina Ionescu was going to inbound the ball with, just a few seconds left. Stewie literally grabbed her, put her on the court in the position she wanted her, and took the ball out, because Stewie knew that regardless of what was said in a huddle or anywhere else, Sabrina Ionescu needed to have the ball in her hand and to make the decision on whether she was going to take her shot or look for somebody else. And stuff like that.
That's not IQ.
On the box score. Yeah. Being able to know that everyone on the defensive side of your opponent is looking to shut you down completely, and to still have impact, and to use that at minimum as a magnet, right? To draw so that your other teammates start getting involved. I mean, we started finally, right, seeing Kelsey Plum get something going. Where's Plum been? Where's Plum been?
Off. She's just been off, yeah. When it's not going, and especially for a player for Vegas, there's so many players you could say are the spark, because there are so many players who are good. But KP is really one of those spark players, and when it's not going, it's really, it's something that impacts them as well. So yeah.
It's not giving. That might be another X factor. But all right. So ultimately, it feels like Brian and I are saying it's done. Tomorrow, see ya. Everyone goes back home for about a week, and then we reconvene in Vegas. Misha's saying, nah, we going 5.
We're going 5, but it's still gonna be Vegas Liberty. I think this is selfishly, this is the series I've been, again, taking the Mystics out of the equation here. Selfishly, this is the series I have wanted to see. I've wanted to see these 2 games have an opportunity to play each other, go back, regroup, adjust, play each other, go back, regroup, adjust, because that's a different kind of game, folks. That's a game within a game. So yeah.
I mean, it's real. We got maybe a little taste in August, but you know, I don't know. I think the Liberty takes it. I think they're gonna be able to defeat Connecticut, and they're gonna have to fight for it though, and it's gonna be a dogfight. I think also the team. This is like a big X factor, right? Stephanie White was asked about it. I think it was Brian, right, about officiating and just reminding her team that that's never something that you can control. So just react accordingly. But the team that lets that go the most and plays, there's a difference between playing a physical game where you're still engaging in that shit, and then when you just go after it, it's like you can blow the whistle or not, because it don't matter. I'm either getting 2 or 3.
Right.
That's like, it's a different type of physical. And Sabrina Ionescu, Brian, we talk about her physicality and how she's deceptively strong. She can play the latter. I think she chooses the former a little bit too much. But if Sab goes full into like beast mode, where she's not even saying anything, she's just giving us that look, I don't know. But y'all know what I mean. When she purses them lips get real. Boop.
Oh, because it isn't.
That's it. That's the look. You see it on TV all the time, because that's it.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
It's over.
That's a meme. You doing this? Wait, isn't that Rosie the Riveter's thing too?
Yes.
Oh no, it's this. Okay, all right. Okay, I'm about to do the John Wall anyway.
That could be fun. I mean, I think if she just, and it was funny because her quote was, Brian, right? No blood, no foul.
Big facts.
No blood, no foul. And like, if that's how she's feeling, like if she shows up and really shows up, no blood, no foul. Listen. I don't even know. There's, it's obviously, I think it'll have an impact on the game, but like low key, I think I'm most excited to see X explode.
I knew you was gonna say that. Yeah.
Yo, social media will be either a hot mess of just diarrhea or
yeah, she's definitely giving Christian Laettner vibes lately. Like she's great, but you're mad about it because but yeah, I have to get that lady her props. Gotta get that lady her props.
That's what we get that. It's over. That because she was shooting, she went 3 for 3, her first threes, knocked them down. Drano. Then we saw it got a little quiet in the middle. But then she made some down the stretch, which were, I don't want to say they didn't make or break the game, but in the cadence of the Liberty keeping Connecticut, no closer than 10, they were pretty big, significant shots. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. We'll see what Sabrina we get tomorrow on Sunday. I don't know, because if she goes off, it's one thing for Brianna to go off. But see, the thing is that Sab, maybe we've seen 2 or 3 games this season where if she goes off and she's the only one that goes off, it's enough. Mm-hmm. It's not enough.
Yeah, when she's the focal point. Not the focal point, but when she's the one who's putting in monster numbers. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not yet, anyway. Mm-hmm. Not yet. But we talked about that. The keys are going to be hers. She just got to wait a minute.
Yeah. Give it a second. We taking it off the lot. We bringing it to you.
Yep. No, Christian Leitner. Oh my gosh, I'm mad because I don't like Christian Leitner, but I must.
I mean, there's not a lot of reasons. Let me not.
Ah,
Because my dad is a Duke graduate, and if he come down here, nah.
No, it's so silly. Okay, this podcast is over, by the way.
Because we just out here cutting up at this
We're
point.
just on here acting a fool. But thank you, as always, for joining us here to talk about New York Liberty basketball on Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans brought to you by Black Rosie Media. Misha Jones in the house, along with Brian Florentin, and I am Erica L. Ayala. We are going to come back. Some collection of us will be back to talk about the results here. And are we going to have to get ready for game 5, or can we prepare for New York, Vegas, the two super teams going head to head? Bing, bing. I don't know. We'll find out.
Bing bong.
Bing. See, no, not bing bong. Not bing bong.
You got it. Oh my God.
Misha been around the New Yorkers too long. Now she one of us. Mute, delete. Peace out, everybody.